Is Piaget's theory of cognitive development still relevant today? There is some disagreement within the scientific community, with experts falling on either side of the debate. Critics contend that Piaget's theory is outdated, while others see it as foundational research. The relevance of past psychological research in light of new scientific advancements holds much significance because of the impact it has on the lives of real people. As we will discuss later, Piaget's theory continues to impact child psychology and education, and his influence extended to great psychologists such as Lev Vygotsky and Jerome Bruner. So, who was Jean Piaget? Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist who lived from 1896 to 1980. He developed a theory based on four stages of cognitive development: sensory motor, pre operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. He earned a PhD in natural sciences and studied psychology under Carl Jung. His work greatly impacted child psychology. Piaget believed children went through the sensory motor stage from birth to 2 years old. During this stage, children interact with the world using their senses and motor skills and progress through 6 substages in which they move from using reflexes and gathering information about things that appeal to their senses, to learning to repeat satisfying behavior and achieve goals, to finally combining behaviors to get what they want and learning how to choose their own behavior. The second stage, which is experienced from ages 2 to 7 years old, is the pre operational stage, in which children develop the ability to use mental abstractions like pretend play and remembering people or events from the past, and learning to categorize items and recognize people even when they are presented differently. From 7 to 11 years old, children move through the concrete operational stage of development, during which time they develop better logic and problem solving skills. The final stage of development is the formal operational stage, which children reach around the age of 11 or 12. At this time, they develop their abstract thinking and become capable of hypothetical deductive reasoning, which allows them to use logic and reason to solve problems. Because of Piaget's impact on developmental psychology and education, and his influence on people like Lev Vygotsky and Jerome Bruner, Piaget's theory of cognitive development is still relevant today. So, what do the critics believe? Critics contend that Piaget's theory is outdated and too rigid. They claim that Piaget's theory is outdated and suggest that modern theories are a better alternative. They also argue that Piaget's theory is too rigid and that children do not move through the stages so precisely. They also argue that children's upbringing, environment, and individuality influence how quickly they move through the stages. Critics, however, fail to consider Piaget's influence on the development of modern theories or his own explanations of flexibility within his theory. For example, Piaget argued that the stages of cognitive development are flexible and can overlap at times. He also believed that a child's environment and upbringing would affect how quickly they move through the cognitive stages of development. Piaget believed that children's individuality would also have an effect on how quickly their cognitive development progressed. Finally, Piaget's theory laid the groundwork that moved developmental psychology away from the belief that children were just smaller adults and into more modern beliefs about childhood development. Before Piaget began to develop his theory, the common belief was that children functioned cognitively as less competent adults, seeing the world in essentially the same way as adults but with less experience. It was also believed that children were passive in their learning and just absorbed whatever they saw or experienced without participating. Piaget introduced the idea that not only do children have a fundamentally different way of viewing the world as they progress through the developmental stages, but they are much more active participants in learning than was once theorized. In addition to the stages of development, he introduced the world to ideas like schemas and knowledge acquisition by assimilation, equilibration, or accommodation. Although his ideas have been refined over the years, Piaget laid the groundwork for virtually every aspect of modern developmental psychology. Education was forever changed by Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Because of his developmental stages, education was adapted to include activities that were relevant to children's age and developmental stage. Since Piaget emphasized the need for children to engage with their environment in order to maximize their learning potential, hands on activities have been incorporated into most schools' curricula, and children are encouraged to take an active role in their learning and explore their environments. Piaget influenced psychological research in countless ways. The people he influenced are part of what makes his theory of cognitive development relevant today. Though he disagreed with Piaget in some areas, Lev Vygotsky was heavily influenced by Piaget's theory. Piaget was a proponent of constructivism, which argued that children are active participants in learning. Vygotsky adapted this theory to emphasize social aspects of constructivism over cognitive aspects, but Piaget's influence on his theories is undeniable. Vygotsky built upon Piaget's active learning theory with his idea of the zone of proximal development. Piaget also influenced Jerome Bruner, who built on his ideas and helped bring them into use in modern education. Bruner used Piaget's theory to defend the position that children can learn anything when it is taught according to their developmental stage. His book, The Process of Education, was a catalyst for the curriculum reform movement of the 1950s and 60s when he introduced ideas based on Piaget's theory, which are still in use today, such as spiral curriculum and scaffolding learning. Piaget influenced countless others, and his theory continues to be applied to child psychology and education. Piaget's theory of cognitive development was foundational to modern developmental psychology. His ideas have been built upon and refined for decades by researchers, psychologists, and educators, creating a more holistic view of childhood development. Piaget's impact on developmental psychology and education and his influence on people like Lev Vygotsky and Jerome Bruner cannot be understated. Without Piaget's transformational theory of cognitive development, modern research would have suffered delays that would have untold consequences. Critics who mistakenly attempt to discard all that Piaget's theory contributed to modern science would do well to examine how far reaching his influence has been. It is unquestionable that Piaget's theory of cognitive development is still very much relevant today.